the applicant, and in particular, Mr. Schomer, who represents the applicant. From that point, we went on to hear from several peer review experts who are engaged by the town to assist the zoning board in various aspects of the proposal that has come before the board. Tonight, the notion was that we would hear from town representatives. We have several that I think are in the queue to speak. Before I get to those, I also want to acknowledge that we've received some written materials from town representatives, and just let me briefly catalog what we've received. We received a letter from Steve Ibis, who is currently with the Milton Conservation Commission. He gave us a letter dated April 5th, 2021, addressing some issues relating to the 41B. And I think all of these things I'm going to mention are part of the public record. We've also had two letters, one dated, actually both dated March 31st, 2021, from Marina Fernandez, the town engineer, setting out some points with respect to the application. We've also had a letter from Tim Zawinski dated January 28, 2021. And in that letter, there is a summary of various points by representatives of the town of Milton, including Chief Madden of the Fire Department, Caroline Kinsella of the Public Health Department, Chase Berkeley of the Department of Public Works. There was a representative apparently of the Milton Public Schools that offered some thoughts. And also there were some written points that were raised by Mr. Zawinski in the memo that was attached to his letter. So we've had a fair amount of information from the town that's been presented to us. As I said, my understanding is that we're going to have several representatives of the town speak tonight. I think we're going to start with John Kiernan from the Conservation Commission. We're going to hear from Tim Zawinski, Chase Berkeley, who I mentioned a moment ago. Apparently, Chief Madden from the Fire Department is not available this evening because of a commitment with respect to the Firehouse Building Committee, so he won't be able to attend. But as I said, he did give us written comments. We'll also hear from Steve O'Donnell from the Historical Commission. And my understanding is that we'll hear from the always welcome Kathleen O'Donnell, who I think represents the planning board in connection with this application. So with that little bit of background, I would turn to, I guess, Mr. Kiernan, if he's on board with us this evening.
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Okay.
Good evening, all. And I should start with a disclaimer. First, thank you for allowing me to participate in this. But the disclaimer is that because we anticipate a notice of intent coming before the Conservation Commission, I'm not in a position to give any kind of advisory opinion, and I cannot prejudge an application that is not yet before the Conservation Commission. So I'm actually in a position simply to respond to any questions and to state generally what some of the environmental concerns are for this project. And they're probably best summarized in the letter by Steve Ibis. I actually don't have that in my hand, but I know that primary among our concerns is the twofold component of water discharge. One is surface water. Where's it going to go? And secondly is the elevation of the groundwater, because some of the tests thus far have indicated some significant, when I say problems, they're not problems unless and until you try to do something. It's almost like putting a large person into a bathtub. The water has to go somewhere, and that will be our primary concern. So I'm not commenting on the application as it's been presented as a comprehensive permit before the ZBA, because I don't have a notice of intent, which I will respond to at the appropriate time when it comes before our commission. But basically, water is our biggest concern, and that would be with respect to any project. In notwithstanding the size, any alteration of the resource area or any alteration within the buffer zone would be of concern to us. So I'm not really in a position to give that advisory opinion, but I can respond to questions that either members of the public have or members of the zoning board of appeals.
Thank you, Mr. Kieran. I appreciate the limitations on what you can cover here. We've had a fair amount of testimony with respect to both surface and groundwater, and I think we're all becoming versed, at least in some of the nuances of those issues. So I appreciate your sort of bringing that back to our attention. I don't have any specific questions for you, and I appreciate that there's very little that you can say, certainly to the extent that it would infringe upon the task of the Conservation Commission. But I'll ask Mr. Brown and Mr. David whether they might have any questions before I ask whether the members of the public do.
I don't have any questions at this time, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Mr. Schomer, do you have any questions?
No, I don't, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much.
Okay. Beverly, are there any members of the public who have raised their hands?
Oops, sorry, no, but perhaps Ted Daber?
I have no questions either. Thanks, Bev.
Sure. No, there are no attendees right now with their hands up.
Okay, great. Well, Mr. Cannon, I guess that's all. We appreciate you taking the time to come on with us this evening, and thank you for your thoughts, and we'll let you go on your way.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
Good night, all.
Good night.
Tim, are you with us? Tim
Yes, I am, Mr. Chair.
I will follow your lead in terms of people's availability and timing in terms of who we should hear from next.
Yeah, so I've been trying to keep an eye on the attendees list, and it looks like most everyone has been brought into the room. I see Lieutenant Mark Alba is in the attendees list from the Milton Police Department. Bev, I don't know if you can elevate him.
Who is that, Tim?
Mark Alba.
Oh, I saw that name. I didn't recognize it. I'm sorry.
No, not a problem. Not a problem. So I don't see. I don't know if O'Donnell family is Steve O'Donnell from the Historical Commission.
And that's what I was wondering. So that's why I let them in, because I thought it might be Steve.
All right, should we turn to Mark Alba then first?
Well, I was going to say, Mr. Chair, in my email earlier, I had recommended leading off with the boards and commissions, which would have been Conservation Commission, Planning Board, and Historical Commission. So if O'Donnell family is in fact Steve O'Donnell, that would be great. And if not, maybe they can go back to the attendees section. In which case, the other O'Donnell in the crowd, Kathleen O'Donnell from the Planning Board, can take her opportunity.
Okay. Bev, do we know if that's the Steve O'Donnell family?
O'Donnell family, could you respond? Oh, no, that's not Steve O'Donnell. Okay.
You say it is not Steve O'Donnell?
It is not, no.
Okay. Is Kathleen O'Donnell with us?
Yes, Kathleen is with us.
Okay, why don't we recognize her next?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
You're welcome, Mrs. O'Donnell.
I didn't realize how common a name O'Donnell was in this town, so. But full disclosure, I'm not related to any of them.
Okay.
So as you know, the planning board sent a letter on January 19th, 2021 with significant comments on this project that included a massing study that was prepared by one of our members. I know from listening to the session the other day that the peer reviewer, Cliff Beamer, hadn't actually seen our massing study. I think that would have been interesting in light of his comments. That would have been supportive of his decision and his opinion that the site is too small for the project that has been proposed. And that's sort of our basic thought on this project, is that the site is too small, too constrained by wetlands, by this intermittent or perhaps permanent stream, the narrowness of Canton Ave. All these kinds of factors lay into the fact that we think this project is just too large for the site. So we did have that letter on the 19th, which I would recommend to you. In the meantime, as we've been listening to the, sitting in on these hearings, we have noted the problem with stormwater concerns, the fact that all the controls are below the existing groundwater level. We're concerned about the groundwater impacts, which would be significantly increased by the fact they have to clear the site. And I wouldn't be the first person to say that, this is sort of like a big stone, big bathtub in a wetland, that is just going to be displacing too much water. And there's no evidence or support in the materials provided by the applicant to indicate how they're going to handle stormwater or groundwater. Those questions have come up through your other peer reviewers. There's a significant, obviously, increase in the impervious surface, and we're concerned about that for two reasons. It just means more runoff. And secondly, we had seen, and there had been noted, many significant trees on the site that even the applicant said they were going to save, a couple of them or 3 or 4 of them. But as planning board member Denny Swenson pointed out, so those trees suck up a lot of groundwater. And if those trees aren't there, the groundwater situation is even worse. So we did note the fact that other peer reviewers had suggested using Holmes Lane as an emergency use for this site. I know from my experience handling 40B applications in other towns and cities is that, you do like to see 2 means of egress, and we only just have the one on Canton Ave. Holmes Lane would be useful as an idea for that purpose, but unfortunately, I don't think the configuration of Holmes Lane allows for that. It's too narrow. There's no turning circle. I'd be interested to hear what the fire department has to say about that. I think the rest of the planning board would be interested in that as well. One of the things that the planning board looks at for any any similar kinds of projects are sort of, how's the site organized and how is construction going to take place? And we have serious concern about the fact that they would be able to, put the equipment they need on this site to do the construction. As we all know, Canton Avenue in this section is a narrow 2-lane road. There's a stone wall around the site that would be a problem. And it's a major cross-town connector. And so interrupting that traffic flow for construction equipment is not going to be a particularly welcome idea. And we don't have any idea how that would remotely handle the construction on this site. One of the things that we also look for is what are the sort of on-site amenities. And essentially, this project is a parking garage with a building on top of it. And the only sort of open space available for the children or wherever is a deck on top of the parking lot, which isn't in any way connected by anything to the limited surrounding open space that they may have left. So there's no sort of recreational area for the kids living in this building. There's no snow storage area shown. And I don't know where they would put that. So those are concerns that we do have, that there's, the landscaping is negligible. We haven't really seen what they had proposed. When we did the site visit, we had recommended that they, as I said, save the significant trees that are on the site, including at least one, run of trees that are along the existing driveway. But I know that there's been some talk from your traffic peer reviewer that he thinks that the driveway should be moved, which would mean losing all of the trees that line that driveway on both sides. And we would be concerned about that. We think, it's sort of in general, to wrap it up, to let you go on to somebody else, is that this building is too big for this site, and it needs to have too much parking. And because of the fact that they have so many units and everybody's going to need to drive somewhere, because there are no amenities nearby, there's no shop, you can't even get a cup of coffee within walking distance. So everybody's going to need a car. And so that drives the size of the parking garage, and then sort of, drives the whole design of the site. So we would ask the applicant to sort of consider a reduction in the number of units, so potentially reducing that size, the massive size of that parking garage. But as I said, we understand that it's driven by the fact that you have to get a car to go anywhere. We would, if this project moves further along towards approval, we would probably submit for your consideration some conditions that the planning board would consider imposing. One of which would be a contribution to traffic studies and traffic improvements for the intersection with Canton Ave and Reedsdale. As your traffic peer reviewer has noted, that intersection is a mess and really won't be helped at all by the number of cars coming from this project. And may also have to look at the intersection with Blue Hill Parkway because of the fact that they have the ice house, that traffic coming as well. And with the high school opening and all that sort of thing, I mean, there needs to be some serious consideration for how the traffic on Canton Avenue is going to be handled. We did want to note that, these applicants had in fact modified their application for the project on Blue Hill Avenue, recognizing the historic resources that were on that site, the garden, the historic house. And we would therefore sincerely ask the applicant and his designers to consider a redesign of this site to make it more in keeping with the surrounding area. And on that, I will stop.
Thank you very much. Anyone have questions, Tim or Mike for Kathleen?
No questions. Thank you.
Jesse, did you have any questions?
Not for me, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much, Attorney O'Donnell. Your comments are very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Kathleen, thank you very much. Tim, who would you like me to recognize next?
So I haven't seen Steve O'Donnell in the participants yet. So if he turns up, then we'll promote him. He had just a few remarks that he wanted to give. If he winds up not being able to make it, I may ask him to submit a comment letter to the board in written form.
That would be fine.
So we're was that Bev? Were you trying to chime in?
Yes, we have a Steve with his hand up. I just don't know if it's Steve O'Donnell.
It might be.
Where'd he go? Hand down, so maybe it wasn't.
Oh, okay. Well, we'll keep an eye out for Steve.
Yes.
So we're at the town staff portion. So I may ask Lieutenant Alba to step up. Lieutenant Alba serves on the Traffic Commission. He's the town's public safety officer. I don't know if he has any comments on the traffic study or the traffic peer review, or if he just wants to make himself available for questions. But Lieutenant Alba, if you want to unmute yourself.
Thanks, Tim. No, I did review that peer study. It looks to be well done and very thorough. I will take any questions anyone may have in regards to traffic or any specific questions as it pertains to traffic in that area.
Lieutenant Albee, so you're familiar with the proposal for this development in this site?
I am.
I mean, as a professional in the world of fire safety, does it raise any concerns for you about how you would deal with fires on this site, given the proposed access and some difficulties with Holmes Lane?
With all respect, sir, I'm with the police department.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Okay, so we don't have a representative from the fire department. Okay, I appreciate that. Does anyone else have any questions for the lieutenant?
We do have an attendee.
Okay.
David.
Does Lieutenant Alba have any comment to make regarding traffic and safety at the corner of Canton Avenue and Thatcher, next to the police department, and the additional traffic that would exacerbate a current traffic nightmare?
But my comment on that intersection would be, as obviously the police department, the hospital, the town hall. We have a lot of egress and with emergency vehicles and ambulance. With the conversion of Milton Hospital to Beth Israel, we do get ambulances from the city now, meaning Health and Hospitals does utilize the hospital there. I would recommend at the intersection, perhaps that preemptive lighting, that the traffic lighting in which, as emergency vehicles approach, they would take priority going through the intersection. It would turn the signalization to green for that emergency vehicle. I would recommend that for that intersection, as you would have more police, fire, and ambulance service cutting through that intersection.
Any other questions?
Carolyn?
Hi, Mark. It's Caroline Kinsella. I'm just wondering, is Winter Valley, I think I saw this on the paper too, are they planning an expansion at Winter Valley that may impact Canton Ave with their development?
I believe they're planning one new building, is in phase there. What its actual status is of construction, I'm unaware, but one building was presented there.
Thanks, Mark.
Mr. Chair, I have two quick questions for Lieutenant Alba.
Okay.
Lieutenant, just I guess my question is generally, being a police officer in the town in the field of traffic safety, do you have any general concerns about this project being where it is on Canton Ave generally, but also specifically as it pertains to the high school being nearby, as well as the prospect of bicycling on Canton Ave?
The sidewalk situation on Canton Avenue, I know it's on the, the Gulliver Street side. I believe it goes to end, I don't believe it's full on the Holmes Lane end from, say, Thatcher Street or to Blue Hills Parkway. But the high school does add a little bit of element in there, as the entrance and exit are static times. So you would have more traffic during those peak times. If this project does go through, I hope, during the course of the day, it would not be, the exit and entry wouldn't be at specific times, so it would be a little bit more spread out, but it definitely would add traffic, obviously, to that intersection and that Canton Avenue in that stretch, which is one lane each direction. There's no turning lanes or anything like that that would offset anything. And the speed is 30 miles an hour. So I would say, will it affect it? Yes. Will it affect it in the same impact that the high school does due to the entrance and dismissal times? Maybe not as much, but definitely an impact.
What about bicycling? Do you have any experience with the current situation with riding bikes on Canton Ave, or anything having to do with this project adding additional need for bicycling or anything like that?
In my opinion, I can't really speak to bicycling in that. I think there's a coalition in town that could probably speak more to that than I. I know there is obviously cycle traffic with the school and, with commuters and things like that I have seen. But to speak to an actual accident involving a bicyclist, I'd have to look into a little more that would, target that specific aspect of roadway.
Okay, thanks, Lieutenant. Appreciate it.
Other questions, Bev, for the lieutenant?
Yes, we have an attendee, Robin O'Neill.
Hi, my name's Robin O'Neill. I live on Holmes Lane. Officer, you were saying that the times that the high school traffic really wouldn't affect this, but I know pre-pandemic, my husband leaves between 7:15 and 7:30, and making a left-hand turn onto Canton Avenue is very difficult because of the existing high school traffic at that hour. Do you think that since that would be a commuting hour, would the project exacerbate that issue now? And how would people be able to make that left-hand turn going towards the high school and sitting in a line of traffic that sits there for, I would say, between 7:30 and at least till 8 o'clock before it starts to ease out? Thank you.
Speaking of that, I misspoke, but what I had meant was that the traffic coming out of that complex, if it was to happen, would be a little bit more spread out than it would be at a high school with a specific time of entrance and exit. Naturally, it would be, commuting traffic and things like that, people going to work and whatnot. But I agree with you. There is a line of traffic there. So much so in the fact that the town did spend some money and, put at the intersection of Canton Avenue and Thatcher Street, there's now a left turn during school hours and things like that to have traffic, obviously that was increasing, be able to go through that intersection. So you're correct in, saying there is a line of traffic there with the high school. The town did address that. And would this affect it? Obviously they would put cars on that road and conceivably at that time. So you are correct in that.
Okay. Bev, any more?
Robin, are you done? You said.
No, I was going to ask one more question.
That's all.
I have a video from a few weeks ago at around 12:15, 12:30 when the high school was letting out from half day. And that's half of, I'm assuming, at half the level that went from Thatcher Street past Holmes Lane, past the high school, past Indian Cliffs and down the hill. And that lasted for a good half an hour. So I know that's more midday, but I'm saying, when we get back up to full traffic, this is going to become an even bigger issue in the area where it could take you 3 or 4 light changes to get through the Thatcher Highland Street and then another 3 or 4, 2 or 3 maybe to get past Reedsdale Road. Is this going to, and those are rush hour times. Is this going to, really create a problem for the area?
Was it more of a comment or were you questioning it? I believe what you're saying. I do travel that road during those times. And like I said, the exiting of the high school, it does exacerbate the traffic on that road. I would kind of go to more of a traffic engineer on a study like that. But it is, as you say, I don't see it to that extent all the time. But yes, the times of dismissal and the time of entrance is going to affect that area.
But even so, it's even past the times of entry and dismissal. It takes a longer time for it to filter out. There's people trying to get to Milton Academy. There's people trying to get to the middle school, the high school. It's just, I guess I'm saying, it's hard living here in this area now because of the traffic and adding this many more vehicles that are going to have to be used because there isn't a whole lot to do around here except drive a car. I know I'm making a statement, but I'm just asking, do you think this is going to exacerbate it?
Well, anytime you put a project in and you're going to have vehicular traffic, it would increase. So it would, to an extent, it would be more of a traffic engineers to give you numbers, but I would agree it would exacerbate it. But to the extent, I couldn't give you a definitive answer. But as you say, you live there, you see it every day, and we see it in a different way. We're just kind of, working enforcement arm of that, but you're living outside it. So, I take you at your word.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, we have another one.
Okay.
All right.
I think maybe just 1 or 2 more. Bill, I think the lieutenant has pretty much exhausted what he had to say, and I think he's been very clear on his thoughts and position on this.
We just have 2 hands up.
Okay.
Could you unmute?
You looking at me by any chance? I'm
Yes.
Cecilia Bethany.
Yes. I'm
Okay.
sorry.
We're all concerned with the traffic issue. I am concerned with the traffic issue from a safety point of view. I'm a walker. And then when I walk between the lights at the high school, the lights at Thatcher, and going the other direction, the lights at the Parkway, if you try to cross that road anywhere except the lights, you're putting your life in your hands. Seriously. And there's no way to get across it. It's a long walk in between those traffic lights. So don't just put your emphasis on the vehicular traffic. You have to put your emphasis on the safety of the people that live on either side of Canton Ave that need to cross in between those areas. The project would be great if you had a wider road, more area. It doesn't fit where it's going. It is a greedy project that is looking to put the maximum number of units with no concern for the huge impact that it will have on the people of this community. I'm in the Indian Cliff area, and believe me, it isn't easy getting in and out of the street with the car and walking across those streets if I have to cross the road. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more, Bev. Hopefully a
Yes.
question.
David Topher?
Yes, thank you. David Taher, Canton Avenue. So Officer Alba, my question is, what would it take for the Town of Milton Police Department to state that there is a traffic and safety issue outside of their department and at the nearest intersection where your job in public safety is adversely impacted due to the traffic congestion at multiple times during a typical day? What is the measure that the police department will use to say this is unacceptable? Thank you.
Well, I would have to say that congestion in and of itself, in one aspect, adds to safety. I would say, intersections like Randolph Avenue or Chickatawbut, where Mass DOT measures accidents and, it puts it in a grade pattern where you would, restructure the roadway to prevent it. We do have measures on that road. I sat on the traffic mitigation committee, and one of the measures on that road was the congestion, especially in the morning. This is when, pre-COVID, when we had traffic backing up along Canton Avenue, high school traffic, and we added that light sequence to Canton Avenue at Thatcher Street to alleviate some of that. Some of the measures now obviously are COVID. You're seeing a little less, but as someone previously stated, depending on the day, you have traffic backed up from, as she said, from Canton Avenue to almost Blue Hills Parkway. Congestion in and of itself, we have to remedy it. It would probably take, situations where we'd have to correct the lights both at the intersection of Thatcher Street and the one at, Reedsdale. So they'd almost communicate in sequence to push traffic through, as well as the Parkway on the other end. So in a sense, slowing the traffic down is a good thing, but, where it's a crawl or where it's a standstill, that's more of a design issue or more of a engineering issue, if you will, that needs to be corrected. The accidents on that road, thankfully, it's not that of Randolph at Chickatawbut, say, but, different sections of that roadway have had accidents like many other roads. But I would say road design and engineering would go a long way in fixing some of the issues that are on that. And that would be part and parcel to this, if this was to happen.
Lieutenant Alba, we thank you for your thoughts and comments this evening. Thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Thank you.
Tim, I see Mr. Berkeley up on the screen. Is he a candidate to go next?
Mr. Chair, I may ask if Carolyn Kinsella, our health director, would get a chance. I only say that because I know that Chase is in a lot of ways the star of the show tonight by virtue of his position, which is not to say that Carolyn Kinsella is not the star of every other show. I would be remiss if I didn't take every opportunity to mention the hard work that she's been doing on behalf of the town to deal with the pandemic and the public health issues. And we really do appreciate her taking the time to review this project and to be here tonight. I don't know how extensive her comments will be, but I did want to give her a chance to talk.
That's fine with us.
Thank you, Tim. I only have a few remarks. I appreciate it. Thank you, everyone. The first remark that I have, and you have the list of what I had commented on. The first was about the pest control before the demolition. Also describing details of how pedestrians can safely enter and exit the proposed project, including how they're expected to navigate the crossings. I am a big proponent of sidewalks, and I'm hoping that you extensively put sidewalks in this project, not only for people who are disabled using wheelchairs or walkers. I'm hoping that it can be on both sides, so there is people's ability to walk this project and maybe even doing some laps. I know it was also mentioned about children's recreational areas. I'm hoping that we can see more of that in this project for children and how many children may be at this site. So really, walking, green space, maybe gardens. I also saw that there's 2 handicapped spaces at the building outside, but I'm wondering if it's snowing or raining, if there is any in the garage inside for handicapped accessibility. These are a couple things that I saw standing out. Really, the health of the community depends on people getting out and walking, being able to participate in their surroundings, and indoor amenity space and outdoor amenity space, how much space people have to be able to enjoy the outside and be able to do different projects in your project. So those are a couple of the highlights that I saw. One other thing I just wanted to mention about Winter Valley is, I know this was brought up too about stormwater concerns. I have been to Winter Valley to Building 2 on numerous occasions. There has been complaints of flooding, and they have built Winter Valley on slabs. So there's groundwater that's seeping up into those slabs. And so that's been a concern over on Winter Valley. I don't know if that's going to be impacting what you're going to see with stormwater on that site, but I just also wanted to mention that. And I think that's all. Just the sidewalks and, the health of the environment and the people that will be living there, that they will be able to enjoy the space. I thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Tim, is it Mr. Berkeley?
Did anyone have any questions for Ms. Kinsella? Or do we want to move straight to Chase?
I think we could. Sorry.
I have a Steve. Again, I'm not sure if it is Steve O'Donnell. Let's take a chance here. Steve? Can you unmute, Steve?
I had no icons before. Hello?
Pardon me?
Yeah, we can hear you, Steve.
Okay, thank you. I'm very sorry. My apologies. Was having trouble with Zoom, so I called in. I do have some comments I'd like to make. Good evening, Mr. Chair and board members and hearing participants. The Historical Commission is still very much opposed to this project. Although it's a 4.7 acre parcel, the frontage on Canton Avenue is much narrower than the back of the property. The entire site is heavily forested, as are neighboring properties, creating secluded settings for this small group of homes. The 5 homes in this historic Holmes Lane area identified as the Vos Shepherd Homes area in the Massachusetts Cultural Resource Inventory System, or MACRIS, were built between 1767 and 1927 and were occupied by members of prominent Milton families. These buildings include the Colonial Revival residence at 648 Canton Avenue, which is scheduled for demolition. It was built in 1891 by J. Porter Holmes, a longtime elected Milton town treasurer. As proposed, the project would see parking and pavement covering nearly the entire rectangular portion of the parcel. Construction of a new 2-way driveway and sidewalk to Canton Avenue would remove much of the vegetation, as well as a significant section of historic stone wall, dramatically altering the streetscape from Canton Avenue, which is identified as a scenic road under Mass General Laws, Chapter 40, Section 15C. In order to accomplish all of this, the site would have to be essentially clear cut, removing and destroying all vegetation, including many significant trees. Although the developers say the tree canopy would be maintained, particularly on the southwest side of the property, the plans show no vegetation at all. The driveway on that side of the building is essentially on the property line and encroaches upon the intermittent stream. There's literally nowhere to place any vegetation for screening or otherwise. It appears that the applicant is relying on the tree canopy and buffering to be provided by trees on neighboring properties. However, clear cutting and construction virtually at the property line of the site would inevitably damage trees on abutting properties by cutting and disturbing root structures, thereby threatening even large specimen trees on adjacent properties. Furthermore, excavation for a garage covering nearly 70,000 square feet, plus outdoor paved parking and roadways, will inevitably aggravate existing groundwater issues, thereby further endangering neighboring properties. Historic buildings are more than structures in Milton. They're part of its cultural identity. The Milton Historical Commission is concerned not only about preserving these historic structures, but also stone walls, landscapes, vistas, building scale, as well as the culture and character of the town. This project is simply too massive, dense, invasive, and destructive, and would irretrievably damage the single-family neighborhood of historic homes. The peer review architect described this building as monumental, while adding the comment that there was simply no way to mitigate the impact of this monolith or integrate the building into the neighborhood context. The so-called amenity space atop the parking garage would be as much as 12 feet above grade, itself being half as high as the neighboring structures, while the 4-story building atop the garage would dwarf the adjacent historic homes. This space may look attractive in green from the air, but from the ground, all that would be seen is a wall up to 12 feet high. There is clearly no respect shown for the context of the land or of the community. The parcel is large enough to provide additional housing units, designed in a manner sensitive and respectful to the surrounding neighborhood. A project such as this, including a significant historic building, should preserve the exterior envelope of the building while perhaps bringing the interior space to its highest and best use. Expansion of the building and addition of other structures drawing on the elements of design that mirror the unique existing property would create increased density on the site and also make the project more attractive to the market rent tenants who would make up the majority of the residents who would wish to live in this type of environment. This can be done, should be done, and has been done. In fact, done by this applicant, whose website ironically showcases at least 4 instances in other towns where they have done exactly that, updating and renovating an existing historic and significant building and adding adjacent construction. Their website describing one project says, and I quote, "The thoughtfully planned layout preserves the site's stunning natural beauty and history while providing much needed new housing," end quote. Why can't they do that in Milton? In any event, we would ask the board to deny the applicant's request for a waiver from Chapter 22 of the town's bylaws, demolition of historically significant buildings. And I would also ask if the applicant has filed the required project notification form with the Massachusetts Historical Commission. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Bev, are there questions in the queue?
There are not.
There are not?
There are none.
Okay, thank you.
Thank
That
you
was,
very much for
that was-
the opportunity to speak.
It was a very helpful presentation, and we thank you.
And again, my apologies. I don't know what the problem is.
No problem. Okay, Tim, who would you like to suggest next?
If Chase is ready to go, I think now's the right time for him to offer any comments that he has.
Okay.
Good evening, Mr. Chair. Thank you for having me. So Chase Berkeley, Director of Public Works for the town. So first off, I just wanted to say thank you to the board and to the applicant for the peer reviews conducted, particularly with stormwater and traffic analysis. Those are pretty specialized fields and require certain expensive software to to analyze properly that the town just doesn't possess. So that's very helpful to have those peer review conducted. So I just thank you for that. So in general, I'd just like to emphasize some of the things that we've submitted written comment on. And then of course, happy to answer any questions that might come up. But a couple of the things that I wanted to point out relate to, why don't we talk about some of the typical town services first. So a project like this, we would not provide solid waste collection for, because our collection contracts are fixed for the town. They don't have expansion provisions in them. So it should not be assumed that the town will be able to collect the solid waste from this project. Just like to point that out. And also we wouldn't snow plow the area because it's private land. So there should be no assumption of snow plowing services from the Public Works Department on the property. In regards to the letter submitted by our town engineer, Marina Fernandez, who's relatively new to the town and has served mostly in her capacity as a consultant and completed many of these reviews as a peer reviewer. She did highlight a discrepancy in the number of units. So I didn't know if anyone caught that yet, but I believe it was a number 124 versus 132 used in different forms in the documents you reviewed. So I might just want to clarify what the correct number of units is, because we saw two numbers in the documents. It was pointed out that we would request the applicant to provide us capacity analysis for the drinking water, sewage, and storm drainage systems that they propose to connect to. So I just like to emphasize that we certainly want to look at that capacity analysis and review it and make sure we agree with all of the assumptions that the engineering team put together. Particularly with storm drainage, I don't know how well the engineer understands the town's system, because we lack significant information about the Indian Cliffs drainage that exists on their property. The mapping for that system is not really shown very well in the town's own mapping. So it's very important to do the diligence to understand how the connection from, call it the rear of Old Farm Road, and the stormwater that connects, that is the town system, but conveys through this area, is being conveyed, because just a review of our mapping would give you insufficient information. So that's something that we could work with them on. I just want to make sure that that's understood, that the town's maps are lacking in that area. For water and sewer, I think we have a much better handle on the actual infrastructure in place. And so it's been brought up, but I'll emphasize it as well. A site, most construction sites are most vulnerable when they're first demolished and cleared when it comes to the impact of what stormwater can have on that site. So we would request that a very detailed and specific construction management plan be presented to explain how erosion control will be in place on this site during construction. So if you think about a typical project where an existing building is demolished and vegetation is removed, the site is essentially scoured, and we get a large high intensity rainstorm. That's when the most potential for washout to adjacent properties is there. And so we want to make sure that those abutting properties in the town's land and right of way are also protected from any type of washout like that. So, as the project size increases, that potential for damage naturally increases with it. I just did want to mention that I did get contacted by Scott Horsley, who I think is on the list. I saw his name on the list, requesting to just talk to us about the conditions. I believe he's a hydrologist that's been hired by an abutting advocates group. I'm not exactly sure who all the players are, but he did contact us at Public Works, and we did not have any conversations yet. I just want to make the board aware of that. And if it's your pleasure, we can continue that conversation.
Thank you for making us aware of that. I mean, I have no objection to you talking to the gentleman.
Yeah, I do think it's important for anyone reviewing the site to get our feedback on how we understand the dynamic works, particularly with the storm drainage.
My understanding is that Mr. Horsley has been engaged by, I think guess, Mr. Corcoran and Mr. Corcoran's clients to study some of the areas that you just addressed. And obviously, he's every right to speak to a public official and get public input that's available. So feel
If we're
free
happy
to
to-
check. Go ahead.
I said, we're happy to do that. Yep.
Great. Any
So
other
that-
comments?
That
for us
really
this-
does it for what I wanted to emphasize, but again, happy to answer any questions or go through anything in more detail.
I mean, it seems like one common thread and theme through many of the presentations that have been made over the past several weeks has been significant concern about surface water and groundwater and how they're going to be handled both during construction and after construction, how they're going to impact the neighborhood and the surrounding area. And I mean, I think that's an issue that we're all, I think, aware of and sensitive to, and you've just highlighted again for us this evening. I appreciate that. Do you mind if I open it up if there's questions from members of the public that might want to present to you directly?
We have nothing right now.
Really? Wow. Quiet night tonight, probably. Okay. Well, thank you very much for your presentation. It's been very helpful.
You're very welcome. And if there's any follow-up, just feel free to reach out. Thanks,
Okay.
everybody.
Tim, do you have anyone else that you wanted to have speak to us this evening?
I'm going to give a quick scan to the attendee list and see if there's anyone I missed. I had a few comments that I wanted to share, mostly emphasizing some of my written comments, but also just responding to some of the things that we've heard so far in this hearing. I'm not seeing any more of my people. If I've missed anyone, if they could just raise their hand. But my list is pretty much exhausted. So if Mr. Chair, if you don't mind, I just have a few comments that I wanted to share from the planning department's perspective.
Please do.
So first of all, thank you for representing our letter of January 28th, 2021. Hopefully the applicant has had a chance to read that. One thing that I'll ask on behalf of the town, and not necessarily speaking for the planning board, although I'm sure the planning board would appreciate it as well, that if responses to these comments that we've made could come in a written form from the applicant, if there are any project revisions or another iteration of this project based on the feedback that we've heard during this public hearing, it's just very helpful for not just myself, but the other department heads to, just kind of see specifically the response to each of our comments and questions. I know that, just looking through Chief Madden's comments, he has just a series of just very general informational questions that it would just be helpful to see in written form. So before I get to my own comments, I just want to let folks know that, as you said, Mr. Chair, Chief Madden is currently occupied at the Fire Station Building Committee meeting tonight. It's busy times in the town of Milton, so unfortunately sometimes there are conflicting meetings. But a couple issues that were brought up in previous hearings, he's continuing to evaluate the issue of a second means of access and egress from the site. As Jeff Dirk, the town's peer reviewer, had mentioned, it's a common practice, although ultimately it is up to the discretion of the fire chief whether he feels that his equipment and his team can get into the site sufficiently. The other question was about the ability of his fire trucks to be able to navigate the turns in the circumferential road around the building. And he expressed a good level of confidence that his apparatuses would have the ability to get around the building effectively and respond to a fire in the building. So that was just something that was asked of him and he responded to. And then unfortunately, we don't have a representative of the public schools here, but I did just want to reiterate their comment about the pickup and drop off of school children. The policy of the district is to not send buses up private driveways. And so pickup and drop off would have to happen on the public way at Canton Ave. And so it's really important for the applicant to demonstrate that school children can safely get on and off the bus if they're coming from this project. So those are just a few of the comments from the other department heads that weren't able to make it to this hearing tonight. I just wanted to emphasize a few of my comments from the January 28th letter. And they're in no particular order. They're all, I think, very important issues and things that have been touched on in some fashion in the past and some that are relatively new. The first one that I'll mention is the town's housing production plan identifies a pressing need to accommodate a growing senior and disabled population in the town. There is a statutory requirement for what we call Group 2A units in any multifamily development. These are units that are accessible to people with mobility issues, particularly a wheelchair. It would be, the applicant is meeting their statutory requirement. It would be great if they exceeded that statutory requirement, and especially if there was an overlap between the deed restricted affordable units and the Group 2A units, because what we find throughout the Commonwealth is that those are two overlapping needs in a lot of cases. The need for the handicapped community to be able to live in decent and accessible housing that's also affordable. So that would be something that we would encourage the applicant to look into. Jeff Dirk, the town's traffic peer reviewer, had mentioned this in his testimony about the parking ratio, and I have some comments about parking. I'm in no way trying to undercut Jeff's expertise. He is an engineer and has access to data in a way that I don't. My comments are more philosophical, I guess I would say, and that would be an encouragement on the part of the applicant to really think very deliberately about their parking ratio. Traffic congestion, traffic that's generated by a project, especially a multifamily project like this, is a direct function of the amount of parking that's on the site. And if the recommendation from Jeff is that the functioning of the site requires a certain number of parking spaces, I don't necessarily discount that. What I would say to the applicant is to avoid building even one more parking space than you need. Developers a lot of times don't really need to hear this. Parking is expensive to build and is not a tremendous revenue generator for real estate. But I would just really encourage them to sharpen their pencils throughout this process and really drill down and be deliberate about the amount of parking that they provide. Again, it leads to increased impervious surface. It leads to increased traffic in and out of the site. And if you can avoid that sort of thing, you really do want to do that. We've talked about bicycle facilities in the public realm. The town is engaging with the Metropolitan Area Planning Council on a bicycle and pedestrian master plan process. Stay tuned for that in the next couple of weeks to kick off. It's been sort of discussed in this hearing and in other hearings that the project really isn't taking any quote unquote credit for public transportation or even bicycle commuting in its traffic calculations, which is the right thing to do. It's not a terribly transit oriented site, and it's not the greatest site for bicycle facilities. That being said, every person that lives in this building that commutes via bicycle is someone that's not commuting via car. That sounds self-evident and tautological, but it's true. And the project really should be encouraging everyone in any possible way to use transit or use a bike. And that means the whole litany of transportation demand management techniques that their traffic engineers and planners should be very well aware of. And that also means on-site bicycle facilities for residents, a bicycle room that is secure and monitored, where residents can store their bicycles, a bicycle room that is accessible and not kind of tucked away in the corner of the garage, but is really something that people will be encouraged to use because it's easy to use. So that's something that maybe has not really been seen in the design. And as this project is further iterated, I would encourage the applicant to really try to put together a really Class A bicycle room, because these sorts of things do make a difference. It's marginal in terms of numbers, but the impact of anyone that's not coming to the site via vehicle, really does make a big difference. I would encourage them to look at the City of Boston's bicycle parking standards in terms of configuration and equipment and facilities. Those are very good standards. and they should take a look at them. One thing that I noticed in the architectural renderings and elevations is that it is an auto-oriented site. There's not going to be a ton of people that are going to be walking to this site from anywhere. All of that being said, the entrance of the building is important and should be designed so that it's clear that it's the entrance to the building. If there are visitors or delivery folks or folks that need to get into the building, not necessarily through the parking garage. And I'm thinking specifically of emergency first responders. It's really important for that building entrance to be visible and clear and not something that really just kind of fades into the background. So there should be some design consideration towards that. Sorry, I've got my notes in front of me. This has been something that's been mentioned by Cliff Bomer and others. As we've looked at the landscape design and the architecture of the building, the amount of rooftop open space in this project is quite frankly staggering. Almost an acre of rooftop kind of garden deck, which in plan looks very lovely as a picture, but it really doesn't take a lot of adding up and connecting the dots to realize that this is, as Kathleen O'Donnell put it, a parking garage that has a building on top of it. I don't want to speak for anyone's design sensibilities. I don't think you would necessarily design that type of rooftop open space if you didn't have that size of a garage underneath. So there may be opportunities when we have concerns about massing and height for this project to potentially reconsider the amount of open space on that roof deck, to potentially reconfigure the massing of the building to take advantage of that space and potentially lower height or move massing around so that it's less obtrusive. That's the extent of my of my capacity as an architect to make that recommendation. The other thing I would ask is if some more details about whether that space is going to be programmed or not. It is a tremendous amount of space that if it's not programmed or is not kind of promoted effectively among the residents, it could go to waste, and then you've got a kind of lost opportunity to do things. So I would ask the applicant to first maybe think about, are there ways to tweak the building so that we're taking advantage of the footprint that we've got? And then as a secondary step to consider the programming of that space. The last comment on my list, maybe these are in order because this seems like the least important one, but I think it speaks to a couple other issues that are very salient. And that there should be an outdoor dog walking area for residents. There's a lot of apartments in this building. Some of those folks are going to have pets. Asking folks to either walk down to Canton Ave or wherever, that is an impact of a project and should be taken care of on site. And I think it kind of speaks to the general principle of, what is the open space strategy for this project? An outdoor dog walking area, a tot lot, a sort of active recreational outdoor space. These are all things that other folks have mentioned in their comments, and I think this is kind of a piece with that. Two more things, and then I'll end and take anyone's questions. I wanted to address the traffic and congestion issue because I think what we're hearing through this hearing process is that the traffic situation on Canton Ave and sort of by extension, Highland, Thatcher, Reedsdale, but Canton especially presently is not good. And the question becomes, to what extent does this project exacerbate that issue? And really, does it make it a functional place to have traffic entering and exiting Canton Ave? And from what I'm hearing and observing, in the mornings and the afternoons, is that it's bordering on dysfunctional today without this project. And the reason I say this is for a couple reasons. It underscores the fact that these are systemic, townwide and quite honestly regional issues that need to be dealt with on a townwide and a region-wide basis. And so that's not to sort of let the project off the hook. The project needs to mitigate its traffic impacts, and it really needs to consider how effectively it's going to circulate cars in and out of this project. But if this project doesn't happen, we still have a problem. The other issue I wanted to kind of bounce off something that Lieutenant Alba said earlier is that the conversation around congestion is such that everyone has a hard time getting out and sort of getting on the road because of the congestion, which is a tremendous inconvenience. And I've used to live in Neponset Circle, so I know what it's like to not be able to get out of your street when there's traffic backed up. But he mentioned, a really important issue, and it also speaks to the systemic nature of the problem, is that traffic congestion is actually making the streets safer. You can drive fast or you can drive safe. You can't do both. And so for there to be congestion means that cars are not driving fast. The speed of a vehicle is the number one determinant of severe injury or fatality in a traffic accident, especially with someone that's not in a car. And so that traffic congestion is really, I don't want to say that there's positive byproducts to traffic congestion and backups there, because I think that it is a symptom of dysfunction. But it speaks to the fact that if cars were driving faster down Canton Ave the way it's designed now, it would be a less safe street. There was a commenter earlier talking about walking and crossing, maybe not at a crosswalk or a light, and how dangerous it is. And I 100% agree with that. That is a function of the design of the roadway. It's a function of the design of a lot of roadways in the town of Milton. And I think, we need to look at this project specifically and look at its impacts and really, encourage the applicant to mitigate those impacts that it's going to be putting on the roadway. But I think also as a town, we need to really look at, honestly, the report of the Traffic Impact Mitigation Committee that was really concerned with traffic safety, and really look at our streets and think about them as, how do we make these streets safer for everyone, not just drivers. We do have the high school, we have the library, we have the preschool, we have the two churches. This is a really sensitive area for traffic safety, not just people in cars, but people outside of cars. And so I just want people to sort of keep that in mind as we have this conversation, that, we need to look beyond this project at these solutions. And the final thing that I'll mention, and I know I've been speaking for quite a bit, but I just wanted to sort of get this, out there. We're, as a town, we are very concerned with the physical impacts of this project, the stormwater impacts, the traffic impacts, the design impacts. Especially our goal is to offer comments and offer advice and encourage this project to mitigate those impacts, especially as it relates to stormwater. We don't want to see a project that is creating adverse conditions for abutters. And I think, we've demonstrated, through our analysis and through our comments that this project has a lot of work to do in that regard. And that, we stand behind the peer review report, and the project does have a lot of changes to make in order to make sure that it's mitigating those impacts to the neighbors. The thing that I want to mention is that the town is also in desperate need of housing, of rental housing, and of affordable housing, which this project proposes to build. This is by no means meant to be a comment that cheerleads for this developer, for this project. We've tried to address this objectively and really look at the physical impacts. But there is a need for this type of housing. And so I would encourage everyone involved in this process to continue to really work towards mitigating those physical impacts, and really hoping that we can get a good project out of this process that provides some desperately needed housing for the town. So, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to offer those comments. I'm done for now if anyone has any questions.
Okay. Beverly, are there any questions for Mr. Zawinski?
Yes, we have two right now. One is Beth.
Okay.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
This is Elizabeth Janiga from 658 Canton Avenue. I just have two comments or questions for the gentleman that just spoke. in theory, I guess it's true that if you're so congested and you're not moving, the road would seemingly seem safer. But if you're so congested on the road and you have people trying to get out of their driveways and they can't, how are we going to pull over for emergency vehicles? That's my first question. My second question and comment is, a few meetings ago, I believe they said the state had designated the intersection of Canton and Reedsdale as, I guess, a safety issue. If people are frustrated because they're waiting for lights to change, when they're rushing to get to work, this is when they go through lights, red lights, and don't follow the traffic laws. This morning at approximately 6:10 or 6:15, I pulled up to a red light at the intersection. I was at the library. I was going to be crossing Reedsdale. I was on Canton. I was crossing Reedsdale to get onto Center Avenue. The light turned green. 3 pickup trucks came speeding, going down towards Brook Road through the red light. This is at a time when it's not congested. People don't follow. These are probably people that are cutting through. These are not townspeople, I'm sure, or they could be. When people are frustrated, people are rushing, having congestion actually can cause more of a problem. That's my first comment. And maybe you could address that. The second is with the bikes. I mean, you want to have them make a nice bike room and encourage people to bike. Where are they going to bike to? They're going to bike around Milton for recreation. They're not going to be biking to the Quincy Stop and Shop to go grocery shopping. Where are they going to bike? They're going to bike their kids to school. They're going to bike themselves over to South Shore Mall and they're going to bike back. I mean, making a huge biking thing would be more of a recreation. It's not going to somehow mitigate and not have people have more cars. Thank you. Or less cars, rather.
Thank you. Tim, did you want to respond to any of those questions or comments?
Yeah, absolutely. And it seemed like there were 3 sort of issues there. So keep me accountable if I forget any of them.
Okay.
I don't mean my comments to sort of defend congestion in this area. It is, like I said, the street is designed to function in a certain way, and congestion is a kind of symptom of dysfunction because there are just too many cars on the road. And so I don't think anyone's rooting for congestion over here. It is another symptom of congestion is the cars are going slow and it's safer. I don't think we should be, encouraging congestion as a safety measure. So I just want to be clear on that. What I will say is that as the street is designed, if there wasn't congestion, cars would be driving much faster, which creates a less safe condition for people that are crossing the street. And so there's an engineering and there's a design balance that needs to be struck between the ability of cars to get to and from in a convenient and timely way, and for it to be a safe environment for pedestrians. And so, again, that's something that this project could potentially contribute to, but it's also something that really needs to be addressed on a systemic basis on the part of the town and on the part of the Commonwealth, quite honestly. The question about congestion leading to frustration and tension and poor decision making or rash decision making on the part of motorists, I don't disbelieve that. I drive from time to time. I get frustrated. I hope I make good decisions. I hope we all make good decisions. What I think your comment kind of underscores is the importance of there's no controlling the judgment of an individual motorist. You could be in congestion, you could be having a bad day, you could, there's any number of reasons why you may be distracted or making a bad decision behind the wheel. So I don't discount that there is an effect of traffic on people's mental state. I think that really, again, underscores the need for the street to be designed and engineered and laid out in a way that even if someone is making a bad decision or is driving too fast or is blowing through a stop sign or whatever, the street needs to be designed in a way that is not a catastrophic and life imperiling decision for other road users. And so Again, I don't think anyone, and I don't want anyone to misinterpret my comments as sort of encouraging congestion. What I am encouraging is a street design that is safe for all users, and so that we're not depending on, drivers not being frustrated, to make good decisions. It should be something that, no matter what, you're in a relatively safe position. And again, there are things that the project can do. We've talked about a road safety audit that they could contribute to at that intersection, which could provide, suggestions for how to either redesign or re-engineer that intersection for safety purposes. But again, it's something that the town and the Commonwealth really need to start taking seriously. And then finally, on the issue of bicycles, I understand your point. And again, I want to kind of make clear that there's not going to be anything that this project can do to get half of its people on bicycles, biking around, because you are right. There is a lack of amenities outside of the sort of civic spaces that are in the town center area. It is quite a bit of a hike, even if you've got a bike, to the grocery store or to, wherever. I think that speaks to land use decision-making in the town of Milton, that there are not really a lot of amenities around here, and that the town is so auto-oriented. But I think the point about, making it easier for people to bike is that, it's a 15-minute ride to Mattapan Square and to the Blue Hill Ave commuter rail station. It's about a 20-minute ride to Ashmont. It is conceivable that someone and perhaps multiple people in this building would make that decision to commute to their job, by biking to public transit. I recently moved, and my bike is actually locked away in a shed right now, but I commute by bike almost every morning. I do it because there are adequate and safe facilities to do that. And again, that becomes something that's a little bit beyond this project in terms of, creating safe facilities for people to be able to safely bicycle. But it is the responsibility of the project to, if people are going to make that choice, you need to encourage that choice. It does have an impact. And I think we can all sort of agree on that without having to say that it's going to be a dramatic impact necessarily, or that the project is going to, possibly have, tremendously significant numbers of bicyclists. So I hope I addressed all your comments there.
Okay. Beverly, are there any more?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
Yes, Robin O'Neill.
Again, this is Robin O'Neill at 30 Holmes Lane. I have two things to say. Will we be able to ask the fire chief any questions about fire truck accessibility? And second of all, probably the one thing I didn't mind so much about the original project was they were closing off access to Holmes Lane. Now that's being opened again, and this is going to bring up very large vehicles within 4 or 5 feet of the front of my house. I live in the middle of Holmes Lane. It works because it's a single family area. It isn't set up to require it to accommodate large vehicles coming through. And this keeps coming up and coming up and coming up. And I believe it's an undue burden on our neighborhood. And again, I would like to ask go back to my first question, or my one question is, will we be able to ask the fire chief questions in a public hearing?
So I would defer to the chair on that question as to whether or not he wants to sort of specifically bring the fire chief to a future hearing. Like we said, there's a firehouse building committee meeting tonight. Chief Madden has come to these hearings before. He's not dodging any of these questions. It's just, it's a matter of.
I'm not saying he is. I'm just asking, will we get the opportunity?
Understood. What I would encourage you to do is if you were to submit that specific question in writing, to the board, we could get that to him and get a response. But if I would defer to the chair on if we want to have, the fire chief come and answer questions specifically in a public hearing.
Well, I think the idea of a writing, at least initially, is a good idea to try and get the chief's thoughts. I mean, we can certainly invite him to come. I can't make him come. I can invite him to come and answer specific questions at some point in the process if we think that's appropriate. I think it's a very legitimate concern, the whole fire issue, whether or not you're going to use Holmes Lane, how that's going to work. I think to me, that's a very significant issue. And I guess I would probably like to learn the answer to that question myself, how that would work if the fire engines had to use Holmes Lane in an emergency situation.
And I've discussed that with him. He's analyzing the issue with his fire prevention staff. So it's not something that he's not thinking about. It's just he's continuing to evaluate that question. But Ms. O'Neill, I would encourage you to submit that question in writing to the board, and we can get that directly into his hands so that your specific situation, he can address that in writing, or come to a future hearing.
That's fine. I guess my biggest concern is we as a neighborhood are asking to go along with a very massive project. And yet we keep going, well, we'll get you answers. We'll get you answers. We'll get you answers. I'd like the answers sooner rather than later. This affects our whole neighborhood. And I understand it's a long process, but when you're talking about a fire engine coming around a corner, might miss my house. It's very tight. And this house was here long before anything else in this neighborhood. And I guess, is it going to be sacrificed? I hope not. I hope the whole neighborhood isn't being sacrificed. And again, asking us to wait and wait and wait and wait, where our whole lives and future and money, the value we've paid, taxes for in this town, keep going, and we're supposed to wait and wait and wait. I'm sorry to get emotional about it, but we've been here for almost 28 years and it's been a great neighborhood. And guess what? Right now, it's not so great with this going on. Thank you.
I very much appreciate your comments, and I understand your concern. I think I mentioned last week before the public hearing, I took a walk up Holmes Lane myself and saw it, and I'm very familiar with the problem and the situation. And I apologize if this process is taking a long time and we're not answering the questions as quickly and as completely as possible. But our process right now is to take in information and then at some point to turn to the developer and see how they want to proceed based on the information we've received. So
yes, my frustration is that we're not getting the information.
It is a slow process. I agree.
Right. Thank you.
Beverly, any other questions?
Cheryl Zagayas.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. To pick up on Ms. O'Neill's comment, several weeks ago when the traffic peer review consultant was here, he had a limited time frame of 1 hour, and there were questions that were remaining. People had their hands up and he was unable to get to those, and those people were asked to submit their questions in writing. The benefit to some people is being able to hear the questions that their neighbors have and being able to hear the answers. So I would request that the traffic peer review consultant be brought back, as well as the fire chief, so that the questions that people have can be heard and the answers can be heard by as many neighbors as who are tuning in can hear them. Thank you.
I think we can eventually accommodate that request, and we can certainly ask these folks to come back.
Mr. Chair, on our end, what I would ask is that as we start to sort of devise what the ongoing schedule is, if we can just sort of get a date that I can present to the fire chief. He's been to these hearings before. Happy to come in and answer questions and offer his comments. So I don't think that'll be an issue. It's just it's helpful to have a specific date. So once we figure that out, we'll get him on board.
And I'm sure Ms. Barrett can speak to Jeffrey Dirk.
Absolutely, Mr. Chair. Happy to do so.
To check. I mean, frankly, I was disappointed myself that he was limited to 1 hour. He kind of breezed in and gave his report, and there was very limited opportunity for anyone to ask questions of him. And obviously, traffic is a major issue with respect to this project, among other issues.
I don't think anybody was happy about it. I agree.
Okay. Well, if there are no other questions, I guess I would like to.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to be heard if I could.
Okay.
I do have a phone call coming in. I don't know
Well,
who it is.
Mr.
I'm
Corcoran, why
sorry.
don't you speak?
Sure,
I'm sorry.
I have a couple of things. One is, there's a serious question whether Holmes Lane can be used as secondary access to this property because it is a private way and the rights in that private way are substantially limited by the deed access that each property owner enjoys, which is single-family dwelling purpose only. I don't think that this property can be used, can access Holmes Lane for any other purpose.
Yes, I just received a call that.
Okay, I mean, I've actually looked at the title, as you know, it's registered land. They don't own the fee to the way. They do have an easement or they have a right of access over the way. Whether or not this project would overburden that easement is really a real estate issue that maybe somebody could take up in the land court. It's not really an issue for us to decide.
Right.
But I'm aware of the situation. I've actually looked at the title.
It is an easement in common with others with the right to use it. And I
Right,
think
it doesn't speak to what you can use it for, it just is a common easement. So that's, I mean, I think that is an issue, although with respect to the fire department, my hunch is they don't worry too much about the niceties of easements. But in terms of whether that could serve as a secondary access for an apartment building with 124 or so units, that could engender some overburdening issues. But I think that's not for us to decide. I think that's a different.
And I'll make that point more particularly at the appropriate time. I do have a more general and substantive comment, and that relates to my comment at the end of the meeting last week. Is that we've heard from two of the town's peer review consultants. This project is essentially unbuildable as currently constituted. They cannot put structures in the ground with the high level of groundwater and manage stormwater in accordance with the stormwater requirements of the state's requirements for stormwater management. It seems to me that it's time to pause and ask the developer to come back with a more realistic plan that demonstrates its ability to fully comply with stormwater requirements, among other things. This is way too much on way too small a site with really significant issues that have been identified by the town's experts. I have other experts ready to testify and I can present them next week. But in my opinion, that's a waste of my client's money and our time to have us just layer on top of the material we've already heard. I think it is now time to pause and ask this developer to come back with a new design that meets the standards that are necessary to be met for a project at this location.
You did make that suggestion last week, and I've thought about it since then. I tend to agree with you. I haven't talked to the other board members, but I tend to agree that this might be a logical time to turn to Mr. Schomer and his client and say, what do you want to do at this point? You've been sat through all this and heard all of the many concerns and issues that have been raised. Do you want an opportunity to go back and redesign this project and attempt to address some of the issues that have been raised during the course of this hearing? So I'll put that question to Mr. Schomer.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
What I can say tonight, Mr. Chair, is that we are listening to all the comments from the town departments and the town's peer reviewers, as well as Mr. Corcoran's consultants that he's hired to look at this project. So we're at the moment we're looking into it. We haven't made any decisions in terms of whether there are going to be significant project changes at this point. But we are working through our responses to all the peer review. So we won't be prepared to offer any kind of substantive revision by next week, perhaps at a future hearing. And is just a question or point of clarification, is next week the last scheduled hearing that we have on the books?
I think it is the last one, but I'll check with Beverly Sutton on that. By my calendar, it's the last one that we have on. Let me hang on for 1 second. So I think I have two more after that.
I've understood we have every Tuesday from now to eternity.
Well, I think
the only dates
calendar that I have goes through April 27th. I have three more scheduled dates after tonight.
I did hold off May just in case, but it was TBD.
I mean, I
If
think
you've only
Attorney Corcoran
scheduled
is
2
right
nights.
about, we did reserve Tuesday nights, but I think the issue is, what's programmed into those nights.
Mhm.
I think that's just the issue.
Right, we just reserved them.
But, okay, but they are on the schedule, yes? The 13th, the 20th, and the 27th?
Yes.
Okay. What we use them for is
Yes.
a different issue.
Yeah.
I mean, if we went forward on the 13th, I suppose we could have Mr. Corcoran begin to put on his case. Obviously, I can't force the developer to take a pause right now if they don't choose not to do that. We can just move forward. But I mean, I think my own personal view, and obviously I haven't talked to the other board members here, but my own personal view is that at some point, sooner rather than later, the developer ought to give serious considerations to a major overhaul of this project and to address many of the serious issues that appear to be unanswered. I think there's significant issues with the project. And having practiced not nearly as much as Mr. Schomer, but to some extent in the 40B area, I'm very much aware of what the law is and what the constraints are on the board. But notwithstanding that, I think this project needs to be rehabbed. I think it needs to be rethought and reconfigured, and serious efforts to address serious issues that relate to the project as it's currently proposed. But if the developer is not in a position to agree to taking that on at this point and needs to study some further, I think we have no choice, Mr. Corcoran, but to go forward with the April 13th hearing. Given the time constraints that we have in terms of when we have to issue a decision, I'd be very reluctant not to just continue to plow ahead, and we can reiterate our question and request to Mr. Schomer next week after you've had a chance to put on your case.
I'm happy to do it. I think it's a waste of my client's money and time. I think it's a waste of this board's time. This is a cynical process, and it is being conducted in a fairly, not the board's doing it cynically, but for the developer to have heard what he's heard for the last month and not take time out and start over is beyond me.
Point taken.
But I'm prepared to go forward.
Okay. Can you just give me a preview? Who do you have one or more experts that you're planning to call next week?
I have 5 people I'm going to call.
Okay.
I've got an architect. I have a site civil. I've got a stormwater specialist. I've got a traffic expert. I've got a tree preservation expert and an architect who's also a neighbor.
Sounds like it could be a busy night next week.
Chair,
Okay.
if I may, just to respond just briefly to what Attorney Corcoran implied regarding what we're doing with this process. I think he called us cynical. It should not be taken away from tonight that the applicant has not heard the concerns that have been expressed by the town, by Mr. Corcoran and his clients, by the town's peer reviewers. We're in the point in the process where we are starting to talk as a team about how we can modify this project to respond to these concerns that we've heard so far. And we're at the point in the process when that is supposed to take place. Typically how these run, as you probably know, Mr. Chair, and other members of the board, and Ms. Barrett knows very well. The process outline is the applicant proposes the project, the town gets peer review and provides feedback, and then puts it to the developer, as I think is happening tonight. What do you want to do? And we have had preliminary conversations with our team about how we intend to proceed. So Mr. Corcoran's implication that we're not listening or that we're ignoring the neighbors or the town's concerns, or that we plan not to respond to them, I would just correct him on that. We are very much listening, and we do intend to come back with a plan that we think will address these concerns.
I'm not suggesting that 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 you're not listening. What I'm suggesting is, based on what you've heard, it's time to start over. Because I'm not sure that you can respond to the comments that have come out to date with the project that's sitting in front of us. I think it's time to develop a new project that meets stormwater and other requirements and come back to the board with a new design that the peer review consultants and the neighbors can reassess with the benefit of the board's help. That's where I think we are.
Okay, I understand your position. But at this point, I think we have no choice, Mr. Corcoran, but to forge ahead.
We'll be ready.
Come back for April 13th. We can see where Mr. Schomer is next week, if he's made progress, and can give us an update on his client's sort of mindset vis-a-vis changes to the project. But for the time being, we'll just we'll regroup at 7 p.m. on April 13th, and we'll look forward to hearing from the many experts that you plan to call, Mr. Corcoran.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Chair, can I ask a quick question?
Sure.
If I'm able to get Chief Madden in the room next week, would it be possible to bring him in? I just want to, I think the issues that he can speak to are kind of relatively circumscribed. I do want to, be respectful of Ms. O'Neill's point earlier, which I think is a well taken one. That this is it's a question that people want an answer to, and I think we should endeavor to give it to them.
If he's able to join us, I'd be delighted to hear from him.
Okay, I'll work on that first thing tomorrow.
Wonderful. And if you could just send me an email to any other members of the board, just to let us know if you're successful in scheduling him, that would be helpful.
I will do that. Thank you.
But otherwise, we'll look forward to hearing from Mr. Corcoran's experts and his clients and his presentation, which will begin next week at 7 o'clock.
Excuse me?
Yes?
We still have that person on hold on the phone?
Which person?
Well, Ned was, Ned spoke, so we put this person on hold. And
okay, if there's one person, if there's just one person that wants to speak, that's fine.
It is.
Okay. I wouldn't want to put them on hold and then hang up on them. So go ahead.
Hello?
Yes, hi. Yes, hi. My name is Janice Madden. I live at 673 Canton Ave. And I was just wondering, did I hear right that there will be no school buses that will go pick up the children at this at the site, that the children, like say from the Glover, the Cunningham, middle school, high school, all have to come down to Canton Ave, stand there and wait for their buses? I can't even imagine what traffic that's going to cause. This is crazy.
That's my understanding of.
Is that true? Is that what you said?
Yes, it's the policy of the Milton Public Schools is not to send a school bus up a private driveway. This is something that comes up in other projects around town, and those projects are required to create a safe and accessible drop-off for school children.
Right. Oh my God. And what are these kids supposed to do in the snow and the rain? And I mean, like I said, I think this is crazy. But thank you for just clarifying that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Beverly, if that's it.
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you all very much. It's been an interesting evening, and I look forward to reopening and hearing next Tuesday and hearing from Mr. Corcoran's team.
Thank you.
Good night to all.
Good night.
Thank you.